So now that I've got this surface where I want it, the next step is to flip the table over. And we gotta. This is the back side, and we got to do the front side and make sure the front side is perpendicular. We got to make sure it's parallel to this surface, and then we got to make sure we got a flat surface as well. So with the finished back side of the table down now, and the front side of the table up, what I'm looking for is to make sure that this surface is perpendicular to the top of the table, and then we got to be parallel from end to end with the back side. Which, by the way, the backside has been, I've been verifying it along the way with the dovetail to make sure that the backside is parallel to the dovetail ends, which is the fixed portion of the dovetail on the saddle, the front side being the gibbed side. And then we need to make it a flat surface. So what I want to do right now is just to get a couple of points, hopefully on the ends, just a real quick bluing to kind of scrape a couple of spots that I can then put the table up on the surface plate and check the two ends to see how parallel this is to the back side. So this is the first spotting on the front side, and it's picked up here at the end. Got a light spot here. We got a fair amount of bluing here in the middle, and then we end up kind of similar down at this end with the end showing up. Now, when I originally had measured this surface, I'm seeing a bow in the middle, which explains this here, and then these ends may be just a factor of the straight edge I'm using kind of rocking on that center section there and hitting either end. But irregardless of that, I want to just scrape just a small area here, make sure I got a flat surface on either end. Just a small area here that I can use to measure the two ends relative to the back surface. So I've got the table up on the surface plate. The back side is down, and what I've got here is I got a little, it's a ground piece of, it was just a piece of stock that I had cut off something that I had ground, so dimensionally it doesn't really matter. It's just that it's flat and it's a parallel surface, and the reason I'm using it is just because I've switched over to a tense indicator, and all I wanted to do was just I wanted to average out. I don't want to be looking at surface finish from the scrape marks on the tense indicator. So I've just scraped, I don't know, about an inch and a half here on either end, and then a section in the middle. So what I've got up here, which would be the bottom side of the front, end to end, it's 0, 0. At this end here, this back side is plus 7/10. The other end of the table is I think I can get it in frame here. So the other end of the table is plus 0, 4/10. On this bottom side, it's 0. And then in the center of the table, We're plus 1 thou 2/10 and plus 2 thou 1/10. So it's kind of lining up with what I thought was going to happen based on quick measurements earlier, that the front of the table, when viewed from this position on the side, is shaped like an unhappy face. Soon it will be a happy face. So I'm going to start at either end, and this would be the left hand end as an operator standing in front of the table. This would be the right hand end. And then what I've got here and what I'm showing is this point is a 0. We're 7/10 big on the back side. And we go down here about 6 or 8 inches, and this front side is +5. And I haven't measured the back in these locations. And then we go down here and we're +1, +1.5, +1.2, but that's the spot that I've scraped. This little section in here is +1.8. This little section here is +2. This line represents where we got to 2 thou. And then we get down back over here, we're back down to 1.5 thou here, 1 thou here, and then 1/2 thou, about 4 inches in from the left hand end. So, and then at either end, at this end here, we're 0 on this front side, and we're +4/10 on this back side. So the back side is tipped. Just thinking now, as I'm kind of doing this, one thing I'm going to check before I do anything else is how square is this top of the table to this surface here. Got to make sure of that first. But the plan right now to straighten out this front edge would be to step scrape this section here. This section here is going to get nothing. This section here will get 1 pass, 2 passes, 3 passes. This section in here will get 4. This section here will get 2, 3, 2, 1, and again 0. And then each of these sections on the back side, or the top side closest to the top of the table, I've added 1 pass because there's about 1/2 thou difference between the bottom of the front and the top of the front. So as an example, in this location here, on this bottom side here, I'd be scraping 3 times, and then in the exact same location in the back I'd scrape 4 times. Again, the thing that I'm going to check prior to doing any of that right now is to make sure is the top of the table square to the front of the table, and if it's not, does it match what I'm seeing as I measure this. So I've just set up the table on top of the surface plate with the front side down. I've got those 2 little sections that I scraped on, one on either end, up on 1, 2, 3 blocks. Got the indicator zeroed out on the cylindrical square. And right now it's showing the backside is light. It's tipped away from the indicator, which lines up with what my plan was on my step scraping, that the top side requires more scraping on the front of the table. The top, the half of the T-slot closest to the top of the table requires the most scraping. So I think the next step here is that I'm just going to step scrape the pattern that I had planned, and then we'll put the straight edge on it, try and get it straightened out and flattened out, and then we'll get it back up here after that's done and verify that it's perpendicular to the top of the table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way across the top half here, because I need 4/10, 5/10 tipped this way to help get perpendicular to the top of the table. So I'm going to take that pass all the way through and then use the step numbering on this side, because the whole thing will get all these steps that are numbered across here, and the backside just got an additional scraping. So the next process after taking the whole top all the way across in this direction will be come back and start from here, and this will get one scraping cycle, and this will end up with its second scraping cycle through here, and that should get us closer for a rough geometry that we can start. I can use the surface, the master, get a decent surface again, then get it back on the surface plate and check it. Just been working on the front side of the table, and you can just kind of see what it looks like right now. But one of the things that's happening is when I put it up on the surface plate and indicate it, I'm getting 0, 0, +4, +2, and that's tenths, 4 and 4, 2 and 3, 5 and 3, 3 and 3, 1 and 1, 1 and 1, 0, 0, -1, -1. Again, those are all tenths, but what's happening when I blue it, I'm expecting to get bluing in the higher areas, but I'm not really seeing it. So I'm going to put it back up on the surface plate and do a bit more inspection, maybe a different way, and see what's going on here. Just doing some more checks here. I've got the front side of the table down to the surface plate. I've got either end on a 1, 2, 3 block. And then I've just been messing around with a 1, 2, 3 block up here. within a couple of tenths. And when I move that gauge or that 1, 2, 3 block around on that surface, there's hardly any movement at all in that indicator. So while I'd had it up on the table here, I'm just checking how square or while I had it on the surface plate, I'm just checking how square the table is. So that's zeroed out there now. And then I take it over to the tabletop. So it looks like we're still 3 thou light, which is about about 9/10 on the front of the table. So I'm going to flip it back over, put the backside down to the surface plate again, and make sure it's still looks square to this top surface. I just thought I would film this and show what I found here, and just to talk about if you're using different types of equipment to measure something and verify different measuring systems against one another. It's important to have an understanding of what you are expecting to see with any given measurement. So, checking for squareness here, I've been using this gauge, and as you can see, hope you can see, that's 0, and this system has been zeroed against the cylindrical square. I've checked it on either side of the cylindrical square, so verifying the cylindrical square as well. And then my first measurement over here, I came over, and what I'm doing is I'm rolling in this base from one corner to the other just to get it flat. And in this particular position, I was showing that I was 2 thou light on the top, and it just didn't make sense with what I'm seeing on that front face. And so I went over here, went over a couple inches, and it zeroes out. And that, I mean, that's a tenths indicator, so that's 0. And then I thought, well, I'll start moving it across and accounting for the actual depth in the scrape marks. You see a little bit of bouncing on the indicator, but as I come along, I'm hitting something on this table surface. And it rolls up on it, and actually it feels like I've knocked it off now with this base, but there was something just kind of sticking out on the tabletop, not the surface plate, on the top of the table itself. It's not quite knocked off yet. So anyway, over here, front of the table and the top, front of the table and the top of the table are square. So at this point I've just verified squareness of the back of the table to the top of the table. We've got both surfaces now. This is the front scraped, and they're both perpendicular to the top of the table. So now at this point what we can do is use these surfaces to work on the dovetail and the flat ways that contact the saddle. So that was the point of all this, is to get this as a reference surface now to use to scrape the dovetails.